your home for principles, not politics. It's the Seth Leibsohn Show. Now, here's Seth.
Welcome Thursday, August 28th, 2014. This is actually, I'll say something about it at the end of the show, but it is actually the anniversary of Martin Luther King's great civil rights march on Washington in 1963. It took place on this day in August 28th and in 1963, and I'm thinking a lot about civil rights. When I think about civil rights and our new, better civil rights leaders than those the mainstream media give its attention to, I think of Jasser, my guest now. He is the president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, the author of one of the most important books of the decade, The Battle for the Soul of Islam, An American Muslim Patriot's Fight to Save His Faith. He's also a member of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, and he is not only a good friend of mine, he is a teacher of mine. Dr. Jasser, welcome back.
Well, it's always great to be with you, Seth. Thanks for having me back.
Well, I was saying also that, this show's like what James Madison said about the country. We're partly national, we're partly local. So no one does that better than you. You're in local trouble, you're in national trouble. What makes me, what's the matter with everyone else is what I'm wondering. But let's start with the local. I opened up my newspaper the other day, and Tuesday, I guess it was, and I see all these letters attacking you in the Arizona Republic. What the heck's going on, Dr. J?
Well, I went innocently with my family to my mosque that we helped build, and we're part of the forming families back in the 2000 and 2001. And we went to the holiday prayer service on July 28th, and the imam had his normal introductory comments, and then he went into a long diatribe about particular Muslims that speak against other Muslims and divide the community, and that they are amongst us, but they're not one of us, which, as he went on, it was obvious commentary attacking any. And the reason I knew it was about me, he's saying they go on Fox News Channel and basically are against Islam. They hate Islam more than we love Islam. And that he was getting them to, he's trying to get the audience to be more active. And he even did a fundraising pitch for the Council on American Islamic Relations. And, he's new in town, and he's an attorney, Jasser Ali. And I've always made it a point to keep my mosque and my family's, involvement there out of my national work.
Of course, I get that.
Because it's supposed to be our safe space.
Yeah, it's about prayer. It's about prayer.
Exactly. And, for our organization that believes that the solution to radical Islam globally is the separation of mosque and state, that's how I like to see it.
Sure.
But then you see a national organization turning and pushing an imam like this to call me out. Now, he didn't say my name. He didn't have the courage to do it. But as we were leaving the mosque after that, a number of people came up to me and my family and were embarrassed and upset that he had done that. And there was even a lot of social media traffic in the day subsequent to that, congratulating him on calling the Zionist in the congregation out and all this other type of ad hominems. And bottom line is my family and I decided that we wanted to set the record straight with the community. So I wrote an op-ed on Sunday in the Arizona Republic explaining what happens to moderates and where the moderate voice is and how we get ostracized, and that ultimately this is, all politics are local. This is the battle, that the collectivist movement of political Islam strikes in all different fronts. And those of us who love our faith are tarnished as being anti-Islam simply because a few days before that sermon, I had been on Fox being extremely critical of Hamas, that they are the reason the Palestinians are suffering, and their warmongering and launching of missiles and tunnels and other aspects have prevented the Palestinians from having any peace. And I was tarnished as being anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim. And, ultimately, once I did that, now they're all running for cover. The letters to the editor that you read were basically saying that I was paranoid and it wasn't about me. And that's why today, if you go to our website at aifdemocracy.org, we posted the entire transcript of his sermon, which I recorded. And we posted screenshots of social media individuals that knew exactly what he was talking about. So when your friends and your enemies interpret that it's about you, it's obvious that it is. And, his plausible deniability is a classic technique done by, theocrats and politicians to try to do the avoidance dishonesty.
I'm just curious, did anyone ever call you an Islamophobe while they were at it, at the diatribe?
Absolutely. There was a poster at the mosque in Tempe that listed the top 12 anti-Islam people, and my picture was.
Oh, how do I get on that list? I want to be on. I want to be on
Muslims,
that. I want to be on that list. I want to be 13.
3 or 4 Muslims went up to him and demanded that he remove it because it was slanderous, and the imam there, Imam Shukairat, refused to remove it, and it was up for 4 months. And this is the thing: is CARE is. I think it shows our success. They're upset that they don't have a monopoly on control of the Muslim community. We've had a growing following not only locally but nationally, and they also don't want to deal with our ideas. They'd rather continue the mind-numbing collectivization of Islamist thought and reform and critical thinking, and what I said in my op-ed was, in today's world, for a mosque at Scottsdale to spend its sermon on our holiday after a month of atonement, not talking about Hamas and ISIS and radicals of Americans fighting with the most militant groups in the world in ISIS in northern Iraq and Syria, but instead talking about me as the problem, that is a community in denial and has backwards priorities.
I'm so curious by this charge of Islamophobia or being anti-Muslim. First of all, there's the obvious, which is, you're a man who, I don't know how many times a day, tells the world you're a Muslim. It's in the title of your book. It's in the title of the organization you founded and preside over. So I don't know how they get away with saying you're against Muslims or you're fearful of them. But the curious thing about me is when it comes right down to it, though you and those of us who count themselves on your side, I'd like to think I'm one of them, Zuhdi, what is it we want for the larger Muslim world? Freedom. The freedom for them to practice their faith and for them to live freely and safely and have all the civil rights that we Americans have. That's what we want for them. How is that hateful? How is that? It's in a weird or it's an odd Orwellian newspeak where those who try and lift the cloak of tyranny on a group or a person or anyone are considered the tyrants or the haters. It's awfully odd that we've inverted things this way.
Well, it's because their narrative is one thing, which is victimization. And ultimately, what I was upset about is we're going on the 4th year of genocide in Syria, and I can't remember any holiday sermon focused on the death of hundreds of thousands in Syria because it's at the hands of other Muslims. And yet the Jewish state acts and defends itself from missiles from Hamas, and all of a sudden it becomes a focus, and anyone who criticizes Hamas is now anti-Muslim. So you see beneath that victimization complex is anti-Semitism, anti-Westernism, and a sense that we are so much in denial they will not deal with our core problems because it's always somebody else's fault. And if somebody talks about the problems and builds an organization and national discussion about it, then we must cut him off and say that he's not one of us. And that's why he ended talking about petitions and that we should put petitions. And then on social media, Muslims in our congregation were saying, let's form petitions saying Jasser should always make it clear he doesn't speak for Muslims in the Arizona community.
Oh, geez, Louise, really?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the main gist they got from his sermon. And, we're clear. We speak for the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, period. We don't speak for all Muslims. And that's one of the things we're trying to prevent is these Muslims like CARE who get up and have the chutzpah to say that they speak for everybody, and they don't.
Yeah. This is an incredible turn for me. The idea that someone like you can be considered anti-Muslim, you who want nothing more than to save Muslim countries from the tyrants. I mean, let's take Syria. I mean, I have assumed, I guess wrongly, that mosques in America would be making appeals to save the Muslim communities in Syria. And you're telling me this is actually not going on. They would rather paper over that lest they criticize the radical elements there. This is news to me.
There's been a significant movement of Muslims nationally against the Assad. It took them a while to wake up. As the Brotherhood moved out of Damascus after almost 20 years of feeding from Assad's trough, they finally also in the West woke up to being anti-Assad the summer into 2011. But my question is one of proportionality. Is that the proportional disgust and activism, they were talking at this sermon. He said, write letters to McCain, to Flake, and all the senators and congressmen about Israel and that it's a terrorist state and all this nonsense. And yet, in Syria, we didn't spend any of that kind of time from the bully pulpit talking about what needs to be done to get America bombing Assad as we should have been doing 2 years ago.
Wow. They had a letter-writing campaign, or tried to have one, to the U.S. Senate delegation saying Israel is a terrorist state. Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
That Palestinians are being victimized and mass killing, and he used the term genocide.
Genocide.
You know, they've used it. I don't know if he used it in that sermon, but it's been used on social media multiple times, and it's just the proportionality and lack of the attempt for moral equivalency while the rest of the Muslim world's burning at the hands of radical Muslims and dictators is just absurd.
Daniel, Dennis Prager had an interesting, if not somewhat sadly humorous point the other day. I don't know if you caught it. He said, if Israel is engaging in genocide, it's really doing a poor job of it because the Palestinian community keeps increasing. The population surveys have them their population keeps going up. If this is genocide, they don't know what genocide is. Zudi, I don't mean to make light of a very serious situation. I'm glad you're standing strong, and I'm glad, you were willing to challenge your own house there for the sake of truth and decency. I want to get to some truth and some decency on the other side of this break, if I can keep you one more segment, because the president earlier today had some things to say to ISIS, to the radical Islamic community abroad, and I think it was at best wanting, and I'd like to get some of your views on that if I can when we come back. Can we do that?
Absolutely.
Be right back with more from Zudi Jasser, the president and founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, the author of the very important book, The Battle for the Soul of Islam, an American Muslim Patriot's Fight to Save His Faith, and actually also a member of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. He knows of what he speaks. We'll be right back. Headline at CNN is the same as the headline at ABC News. I haven't had the heart or the patience to go and look at other news sources. These two were enough for me. The headline is Obama, no strategy for ISIS. We have no strategy. That's a literal quote from the president today at his press conference on how to deal with ISIS, Dr. Jasser. I don't know if that's worse or what he said in response to Chuck Todd, who asked the first question after his after his opening comments, when he said when President Obama said to Chuck Todd and the world that our response in Iraq will be limited. So we have told our enemy our response will be limited, and we've also told them we have no strategy. That must make you feel good as an American, huh?
It's just horrific. I mean, to think, imagine a physician treating, and he called it a cancer today.
Yes, he did.
Imagine a physician treating a cancer for 3 years and then tells the patient, well, I really don't have a care plan yet. I'm still working on it. And his lack of strategy, 3 years into the genocide in Syria that's happening, he's been used as a tool by Assad and Iran. And it's amazing. I want people to look at the speech and compare the language he used about Russia and how strong he was in telling Russia not to mess with Ukraine and about their intervention. And yet when it came to a barbaric dictator like Assad, he barely mentioned his name and somehow said he was going to help moderates and couldn't really answer the question about why ISIS needs to be, rid and how that's going to, affect Assad if ISIS is gone. And, the answer is, I wish he'd bombed both ISIS and Assad. Assad has fueled, and there's a lot of evidence to show that he's given them sanctuary and allowed them to be a foil to continue the militant approach to his entire country. But the bottom line is that the removal of ISIS in Syria, not in Iraq, in Syria will give the Free Syria Army more room to operate. And certainly it may take one enemy away, but actually ISIS has not been targeting the Assad regime as much as people think.
Yeah, I guess my first thoughts were after the press conference. A lot of us have been claiming that he needs to, have been criticizing him for not speaking enough on the issue, for actually being so callous as to play golf throughout these various crises. Maybe I prefer that now that I reconsider the way he does talk about these issues when he does talk about them. I have to tell you, I was grossed out. I was angered. I was moved by the slaughter of Mr. Foley, but I wasn't surprised. what I was surprised by was President Obama's callous and feckless and flaccid response, quite frankly. And then the idea that he could go play golf. But that's the least of it, really. I just don't know why on that day the Pentagon didn't open its cupboard and wage holy war, frankly, against the enemy. And by the way, the president would have had 85% support to do that.
Yeah, and we've done it in Yemen. We wiped out a gathering of 200 al-Qaeda in a few hours. And we can't seem to do it in northern Iraq. And now we're talking about how they have their own economy and all these other things. And, it's pretty sad. It's like, is it malpractice by active intervention inappropriately or malpractice by omission and negligence? And either way, it's complete incapacity to develop a strategy. And I think the other part of this, and it's all coming together, which is why do you have British citizens more fighting for ISIS than they do in their own military?
Why do we have 300 Americans joining the jihad? My God, we are exporting. We are now exporting terrorism.
And the reason we're doing that is there's been no narrative to say that the free world is going to take care of this. So again, the Muslim victimization narrative reigns, and the Islamic State. I mean, they're calling themselves the Islamic State, and we still can't seem to get our head around the fact that this is an ideological war against all those countries that believe in the Islamic State. And the end point of groups like ISIL is an end point that will commonly keep coming back. It's like after 9/11. Al-Qaeda was a routine type of development from Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And we're still not acknowledging that these so-called allies have ideologies within them that are basically the fertile soil for the continued whack-a-mole approach to radical groups and to radicalization of Muslims in the West.
A war can be much like a sports game in some respects, to put it crudely, frankly. You're either winning or you're losing. One side is either winning, one side is either winning or losing. And I suppose if you just took a bird's eye view, or if you landed on Earth from Mars and took a look around at what the United States was doing and what ISIS was doing, beheading Americans with impunity, capturing Americans, attracting Americans to join their cause, and then the commander-in-chief says our response will be limited, we won't be dragged into war, another direct quote, and we don't have a strategy. It's not, you just don't have to wager, you don't have to make a tough decision to wager on who's winning and who's losing right now. And I got to tell you, it's a tremendously scary thought to me. They are on the rise, and we are on the retreat. That's how it's got to look to them and any neutral observer.
And it just seems like he does not understand, and the administration is not articulating why do groups like ISIL do these beheadings and exert taxes upon minorities and push large populations out, because they operate on fear. That is their oxygen. And as long as the world and the local area is full of fear, then they can continue to control their territory. Now it's quite a large swath of land, I think the size of Belgium, that they control. And if we have a commander-in-chief that doesn't immediately launch jets to make them pay a price, which we've been talking about now for 6 weeks, if not more, like we were last August. And his question about, the bottom line is I think a lot of his responses are related to worried about the political ramifications of, flip-flopping between what he said last year of wanting to get congressional approval versus this year now not wanting it, or saying that he might be able to do without it, now talking about a coalition, last year ignoring the coalition when Assad was using chemical weapons. So it's all a political calculus instead of a moral and principled one.
Yeah, it's political, but it's also bad politics, I have to say. I don't know who he thinks he's appeasing. He lost, every once in a while, the truth will out from his administration. Chuck Hagel, who I'm not a particular fan of, himself 2 weeks ago said the world is on fire. Yeah. This is not a fire that existed in 2008, quite frankly. I know we had more work to do, but the fire has been caused by the retreat. That's the oxygen. The oxygen to this fire is the absence of America and American leadership.
And then General Dempsey, a few days later, I guess, got taken to the woodshed and told you can't say we're on fire. So he went and corrected Secretary Hagel's point and said, well, it's just a small issue, and this should go away pretty soon. Yeah,
don't let the truth get in the way. Dr. Jasser, I hope you'll stay at it. I'll stay at it as long as you stay at it. I'm happy to be by your side on this.
Absolutely. We're not going anywhere.
Excellent. The Battle for the Soul of Islam is his book. The subtitle, An American Muslim Patriot's Fight to Save His Faith. I know of fewer better patriots than Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. AIFdemocracy.org is his website. Thanks, Zuhdi.
Anytime. Appreciate it.
God bless.
God bless.